Ludwig van Beethoven is often regarded as one of the greatest composers in Western music history. His groundbreaking work changed the course of classical music and laid the foundation for the Romantic era. But behind the genius was a man tormented by emotional instability, social withdrawal, intense mood swings, and physical ailments, most notably his encroaching and eventually complete deafness. Born in Bonn, Germany, in 1770, Beethoven grew up in a household marked by instability and abuse. His father, Johann van Beethoven, was an alcoholic who frequently beat and berated him. Driven by ambition and envy of Mozart's fame, Johann forced Ludwig into grueling hours of piano practice, often waking him in the night for lessons. The emotional trauma of this early life, compounded by the responsibility of becoming the family's primary breadwinner after his father's decline, likely planted the seeds of the mood disorders that would later emerge. As an adult, Beethoven exhibited clear signs of bipolar disorder, manic periods where he was filled with relentless energy and creativity. During these times, he would compose rapidly and obsessively, often forgetting to eat or sleep. He would isolate himself, working for days at a time, only to reemerge disheveled and euphoric with new compositions. Depressive periods that left him paralyzed by despair, inertia, and intense self-loathing. His letters during these times reveal a man in deep mental pain, plagued by thoughts of death and worthlessness. Beethoven began losing his hearing in his late 20s, an especially cruel fate for a composer. At first, the symptoms were mild, ringing in his ears, trouble hearing high-pitched sounds. But the condition worsened steadily, and by the time he was in his 40s, he was completely deaf. Modern psychologists have suggested that Beethoven's work serves as a kind of musical autobiography, expressing emotions that words could not. His personal struggles gave his music an emotional honesty and philosophical depth rarely matched in the history of art. He remains a towering figure not only because of his musical genius, but because of his profound humanity. He created transcendent beauty while living in darkness, his music speaking the words his mind and body could not. Virginia Woolf, one of the most pioneering writers of the 20th century, shaped modernist literature with her stream of consciousness style, psychological depth, and daring exploration of female identity. Yet, behind her literary brilliance was a lifelong struggle with bipolar disorder, marked by profound depression, manic creativity, and psychosis. Virginia Woolf was born Adeline Virginia Stephen in 1882 into a highly intellectual but emotionally complex household in London. From a young age, she displayed both artistic brilliance and emotional fragility. Her first mental breakdown occurred at age 13 after the sudden death of her mother. This loss was followed by the death of her half-sister Stella 2 years later, and then her father, Leslie Stephen, when she was 22. Each death triggered further episodes of depression, catatonia, and hallucinations. Woolf's family history was also riddled with mental illness. Several relatives, including her half-sister Laura and brother George, are believed to have suffered from psychiatric disorders. This suggests a genetic vulnerability which, compounded by personal trauma, laid the foundation for her condition. Woolf's symptoms closely match what we now recognize as bipolar I disorder. Manic episodes characterized by racing thoughts, sleeplessness, grandiosity, hypergraphia, an uncontrollable urge to write, and bursts of euphoric energy. During these episodes, she often started multiple projects at once, held long conversations, and wrote with ferocity. Depressive episodes marked by profound despair, physical collapse, psychomotor retardation. At her worst, she believed she had no brain, that she was unable to write, and that she was a burden on those around her. Psychotic features that sometimes emerged during severe episodes. Woolf reported hearing birds speaking in Greek, seeing phantom figures, and feeling that her thoughts were not her own. She experienced 4 major mental breakdowns during her life, each of which led to hospitalization or withdrawal from public life. Woolf's first novel, The Voyage Out, was completed after one of her most devastating breakdowns. During its writing, she was often bedbound and monitored closely by her husband, Leonard Woolf. But rather than halt her creativity, her illness seemed to give her access to emotional and philosophical dimensions rarely captured by her peers. Woolf believed that the mind, especially the unstable mind, held a kind of truth that could be unlocked through fiction. Her writing became a vehicle for making sense of her condition. In Art, Mrs. Dalloway, Woolf introduces the character of Septimus Warren Smith, a shell-shocked veteran of World War I who suffers from hallucinations and mental disorder. Through Septimus, Woolf conveys her own experiences with mental illness, giving the reader a vivid picture of what it is like to live inside a disintegrating mind. Virginia Woolf left behind a legacy that continues to resonate, not only in literature, but in conversations about mental health, women's voices, and the connection between creativity and madness. Today, she is often studied as a classic case of bipolar disorder. Her life and writings are used in psychiatric training programs, literature courses, and feminist theory alike. What makes her story so powerful is the duality she lived with. The brilliance of her mind and the pain of her illness were inseparable, coexisting in a continuous and exhausting dialogue. Her novels taught readers how to listen to the inner monologue of others. Her essays gave women intellectual space and emotional permission, and her life remains a testament to both the power and fragility of the human mind. Ernest Hemingway, one of the 20th century's most influential writers, is often celebrated for his terse prose, adventurous lifestyle, and literary achievements. Yet, behind the bravado of the bullfighter, war correspondent, and rugged outdoorsman was a man profoundly affected by mental illness, depression, and bipolar disorder. Hemingway's childhood in Oak Park, Illinois, was marked by a strict and sometimes volatile father. Ernest was a sensitive, athletic boy who sought escape in outdoor adventures and sports. Despite his energetic persona, he experienced early signs of depression and mood swings. World War I was a pivotal moment. Hemingway volunteered as an ambulance driver in Italy and was seriously wounded. The trauma of war, combined with physical injury, left psychological scars. He witnessed death and destruction firsthand. He experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, symptoms. The injury and subsequent hospitalization led to feelings of vulnerability and despair. Hemingway's writing was prolific, often during periods of intense mood elevation. Some scholars speculate that he exhibited signs of bipolar disorder, characterized by alternating manic and depressive episodes. Manic phases fueled bursts of creativity, energy, and risk-taking behavior. Depressive phases brought debilitating sadness, withdrawal, and hopelessness. His adventurous lifestyle, excessive drinking, risky behavior, and multiple marriages can also be viewed through this lens. Hemingway struggled with chronic depression throughout his adult life. He turned to alcohol as a form of self-medication, which only worsened his condition. Hemingway's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of untreated mental illness, especially among high-achieving and creative individuals. It underscores the importance of early intervention, therapy, and breaking the stigma around mental health, lessons that remain vital today. Vincent van Gogh is perhaps the most famous example of the tortured artist, a man whose genius was matched only by his profound mental anguish. His short, turbulent life was filled with emotional extremes, hospitalizations, and haunting inner torment. Yet in his final years, even amidst the depths of his suffering, he produced some of the most iconic and emotionally powerful art in history. Van Gogh's symptoms strongly align with bipolar disorder, punctuated by psychotic episodes and hallucinations. He also showed signs of major depressive disorder, borderline personality traits, and was likely affected by temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition that might have contributed to his altered perceptions and emotional intensity. Vincent was born in 1853 in the Netherlands, the son of a minister. From an early age, he exhibited signs of deep emotional sensitivity and social isolation. He struggled to connect with others and often became intensely absorbed in books, nature, and spirituality. He failed in several career paths before turning to art at the age of 27. During his early adulthood, Vincent's letters to his brother Theo, his closest confidant and financial supporter, are filled with expressions of self-doubt, loneliness, and spiritual torment. He oscillated between bursts of passion for religious life, social justice, or painting, and periods of despair and withdrawal. In his early years as an artist, he lived in extreme poverty, surviving on coffee, bread, and alcohol. His poor diet and declining physical health may have exacerbated his mental state. Bipolar disorder, once known as manic depressive illness, is marked by alternating periods of mania, or hypomania, and depression. In Vincent's life, this cycle is evident. Manic phases. He worked obsessively during manic periods, sometimes producing multiple paintings in a single day. He described being overwhelmed by colors and ideas, staying up for days, walking long distances, and feeling on fire with creativity. These phases were often followed by exhaustion and collapse. Depressive phases. He would then sink into severe depressive episodes, unable to paint, filled with self-loathing, and plagued by feelings of failure and isolation. His letters during these times are bleak and desperate. This cycle repeated frequently during the last 5 years of his life, when he painted over 2,000 works, including The Starry Night, Sunflowers, and The Bedroom. In 1889, after another breakdown, Vincent voluntarily admitted himself to an asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. Here, under the care of sympathetic doctors, he had access to a studio and was permitted to paint when well. It was during this period that he painted The Starry Night, a swirling, emotional interpretation of the night sky viewed from his window. The painting is both luminous and turbulent, expressing awe, wonder, and deep inner unrest. The cypress trees, traditionally symbols of death, reach up to the heavens, perhaps symbolizing his longing for peace or transcendence. Though he was confined, his art flourished. He painted olive trees, irises, and wheat fields, all infused with vibrant colors and kinetic energy. He often wrote to Theo about how painting was the only thing that kept his thoughts from devouring him. Princess Diana is remembered not only as a global icon of compassion, beauty, and humanitarianism, but also as a deeply troubled woman who fought private battles with mental illness, eating disorders, and emotional trauma. Her public life in the British monarchy was marked by immense pressure, media scrutiny, and a loveless marriage, all of which contributed to what she later described as a descent into self-destruction. Diana Frances Spencer was born in 1961 into British nobility, but raised in a household fraught with emotional instability. Her parents divorced when she was just 6 years old, a traumatic experience she later described as a foundational loss. She was separated from her mother and sent to live with her father, an event that deepened her sense of abandonment. Though financially privileged, her emotional needs were rarely met. Diana described herself as lonely and self-conscious, with low academic performance and feelings of invisibility. These formative years laid the groundwork for chronic low self-esteem, anxious attachment, and emotional dependency. At age 19, Diana became engaged to Prince Charles, a man 12 years her senior. From the beginning, the relationship was characterized by emotional distance and a lack of genuine intimacy. Charles reportedly remained in love with Camilla Parker Bowles, while Diana was thrust into a royal life she was completely unprepared for. Diana's mental health began to unravel almost immediately. She suffered from prenatal and postpartum depression during both of her pregnancies. She described feeling like a lamb to the slaughter on her wedding day, doubting the marriage even as the world celebrated. She began experiencing severe mood swings, insomnia, and panic attacks. One of the most pervasive mental health issues Diana faced was bulimia nervosa, an eating disorder characterized by binging and purging. She described it candidly in interviews, saying the disorder was both a coping mechanism and a cry for help. You inflict it upon yourself because your self-esteem is at a low ebb and you don't think you're worthy or valuable. Bulimia gave her a false sense of control during a period when she felt powerless within the royal household. It also reflected the psychological pressure to conform to idealized standards of femininity, beauty, and public perfection. She also struggled with body dysmorphia, obsessing over her appearance and constantly feeling that she was too fat or unattractive, despite being adored for her looks. Though never officially trained or assigned the role, Diana became a mental health advocate simply by telling the truth about her suffering. Today, her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, continue that legacy through mental health campaigns and public disclosures of their own therapy journeys. Diana's life is studied in psychology and women's studies courses, not just as a case of personal distress, but as an example of how institutional neglect and emotional suppression can contribute to mental breakdowns, even for the most seemingly privileged among us. She remains a symbol of resilience, vulnerability, and the need for empathy in understanding mental illness. Winston Churchill is renowned as one of the most iconic leaders in modern history, a man whose defiant spirit and powerful oratory helped steer Britain through the dark days of World War II. Yet, beneath the public image of the unbreakable bulldog lay a private, lifelong battle with severe depression, which Churchill himself famously called the Black Dog. The phrase Black Dog was Churchill's own metaphor for his bouts of depression. It symbolized the dark, menacing presence that would descend unpredictably, clouding his thoughts and sapping his energy. Churchill's family history hinted at a genetic predisposition. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was known to be melancholic, and mental illness ran through his maternal ancestors as well. Born in 1874 into the British aristocracy, Churchill's childhood was marked by emotional neglect. His parents were distant and often critical. He was sent to boarding school at a young age, where he struggled academically and socially. Churchill described himself as a lonely child, prone to fits of sadness and isolation. Early signs of depression and mood swings were present, but went unrecognized in the era's limited psychiatric understanding. Born in 1874 into the British aristocracy, Churchill's childhood was marked by emotional neglect. His parents were distant and often critical. He was sent to boarding school at a young age, where he struggled academically and socially. Churchill described himself as a lonely child, prone to fits of sadness and isolation. Early signs of depression and mood swings were present, but went unrecognized in the era's limited psychiatric understanding. Churchill's depression was episodic and severe. His black dog would often leave him incapacitated, unable to work or engage with others. These episodes included intense fatigue and hopelessness, loss of appetite, and disturbed sleep. Despite these debilitating symptoms, Churchill did not seek professional psychiatric treatment, partly due to stigma and partly due to his self-reliant personality. Churchill found that channeling his energy into intense work, writing, and painting helped manage his depressive episodes. He was a prolific writer, producing hundreds of speeches, books, and articles. Painting became a therapeutic outlet. He once said, "When I get to the black dog, I take up my brushes and paint my way out of it." This active engagement helped him maintain productivity during dark periods, though it did not cure his underlying illness. Marilyn Monroe is often remembered as the ultimate symbol of Hollywood beauty and sensuality, an icon whose blonde hair, red lips, and breathy voice defined an era. But behind the glamorous image was a woman in constant emotional pain, struggling with childhood trauma, abandonment, mental illness, and addiction. Her life was a haunting paradox, adored by millions, yet unable to find lasting love, peace, or safety. Marilyn Monroe was born as Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926. Her early years were marked by instability and abandonment. Her mother, Gladys Baker, was mentally ill, believed to have paranoid schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, and was institutionalized when Marilyn was just a child. Monroe never knew her father. She was placed in a series of foster homes and even an orphanage, where she suffered emotional neglect and poverty. By age 16, she had already lived in a dozen homes and was married off to avoid returning to the orphanage system. This unstable upbringing deeply influenced her adult psyche. She developed chronic feelings of worthlessness, abandonment anxiety, and a profound fear of being unloved, all hallmarks of borderline personality disorder. From an early age, Monroe displayed signs of emotional volatility, mood instability. She experienced extreme highs and lows, often cycling between joyful, hyper-energetic bursts and depressive withdrawal, fear of abandonment. She clung desperately to romantic partners, friends, and mentors, often sabotaging relationships with erratic behavior or emotional outbursts. Identity disturbance. She spoke frequently about not knowing who she truly was, an internal fragmentation that worsened under the strain of fame. Impulsive behavior. This included drug use, overspending, and last-minute career decisions. Dissociation. At times, she felt unreal, detached, or as if she were watching herself from the outside. She once said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not a person at all. I'm just a thing that everyone looks at." Monroe's rise to fame in the 1950s was meteoric. Her films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, The 7-Year Itch, and Some Like It Hot made her an international superstar. But with fame came deeper psychological distress. She often felt exploited by the studios that treated her like a commodity rather than a serious actress. The dumb blonde persona, while successful, made her feel belittled and typecast. She longed to be respected as a legitimate performer and intellectual. Her mental instability made her increasingly difficult to work with. She would show up late to film sets, forget lines, or cancel appearances. Behind the scenes, she was often found crying, disoriented, or in a drugged stupor. Directors were frustrated, co-stars were concerned, but instead of getting the psychiatric care she desperately needed, Monroe was often dismissed as temperamental. Monroe's story remains a cautionary tale about the cost of celebrity and the long-term effects of unresolved trauma. Today, mental health professionals view her as a textbook example of borderline personality disorder, compounded by substance use disorder and clinical depression. Modern portrayals of her life, such as Joyce Carol Oates' novel Blonde and the 2022 Netflix adaptation, highlight the psychological damage beneath her beauty. These works attempt to reclaim her as a human being, more than just an icon or victim. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, is often revered for his profound wisdom, political acumen, and moral vision that preserved the Union during the American Civil War. But beneath the enduring image of this stoic leader was a man constantly haunted by what he and his contemporaries referred to as melancholy. Today, many mental health professionals would recognize Lincoln's symptoms as consistent with major depressive disorder, a severe, recurring condition marked by prolonged periods of sadness and hopelessness. Lincoln's battles with mental health can be traced back to his early adulthood. Letters and anecdotes from friends indicate he was a deeply introspective and often despondent young man. In the 1830s, when he was in his 20s, he experienced what modern psychologists would likely diagnose as a major depressive episode. One of the most telling examples comes from 1835, after the death of Anne Rutledge, a woman many believe was Lincoln's first love. Her sudden passing deeply affected him. In the 19th century, mental illness was poorly understood, and there was no formal medical diagnosis of depression. Instead, Lincoln's condition was commonly referred to as melancholy, a term used since antiquity to describe a state of persistent sadness and brooding. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Lincoln did not hide this part of himself. His public persona often reflected a man of sorrow, weighed down by the immense responsibilities he bore and the personal demons he carried. Despite, or perhaps because of, his condition, Lincoln developed a unique depth of empathy and emotional intelligence. He frequently expressed concern for the well-being of others, and was known for pardoning soldiers who deserted or fell asleep on guard duty, understanding their mental and emotional exhaustion. Symptoms consistent with major depressive disorder. Based on surviving letters, personal accounts, and recorded behaviors, Lincoln exhibited many of the symptoms consistent with major depressive disorder. MD, as defined today: persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, social withdrawal and isolation, insomnia and fatigue. Difficulty concentrating. Lincoln's presidency was marked by almost unbearable stress. He led the country through the Civil War, dealt with enormous casualties, constant criticism, and personal tragedy, including the death of his son Willie in 1862, which plunged him and Mary Todd Lincoln into profound grief. During this time, Lincoln showed remarkable resilience. Though friends noticed changes in his demeanor, he grew more withdrawn, his face lined with fatigue and sadness. Yet he continued to lead with clarity and compassion, even as the weight of leadership intensified his inner battle. Rather than hinder him, Lincoln's depression may have given him a unique emotional insight. His empathy, humility, and profound understanding of human suffering helped him connect with a nation in turmoil. Historian Joshua Woolf, in his influential book Lincoln's Melancholy, argues that Lincoln's depression was not a weakness, but a source of strength. He writes, "Lincoln didn't do great work despite his suffering. He did great work because of it." Lincoln's struggle with mental illness humanizes him. It reminds us that even the greatest leaders are not immune to psychological pain. His ability to persevere without medication, therapy, or modern understanding makes his accomplishments even more extraordinary.